Well, I ran my first race, finishing up my first term in 2016 was when I was elected. And, I ran on an education platform, as well as, we need to grow the economy in our rural communities. I appreciate everything that goes on in Oklahoma City and Tulsa as far as, the economy booming, but in our rural areas, we're suffering, and we've been suffering for most of my entire life. And so, my platform has always been to work on fixing our education problems and fixing our economic development problems and listening to what my constituents are telling me they want to be done on those issues. We had massive budget problems that we had to fix as well. So those are the three things that I've focused all of my efforts on over the past couple of years.
The reason I'm running for the office is because I know that Oklahoma is a state with a lot of potential. And I think that for many years the potential has gone unrealized because there hasn't been a longer term vision in place for enacting policies. It's been a lot of tax cuts and short-sighted cuts. And so I'm kind of running with the platform that we need to build a new foundation, because I think the foundation of prosperity in this state has been decimated over the last 10 years especially. And I think it starts with public education. That has to be our top priority. I think that talking about other things, especially talking about economic development and some of these other issues, without focusing on education, is putting the cart before the horse. We've got to have a skilled and educated workforce in order to get businesses to come here. So education has to be number one. We've cut per pupil spending by more than any other state in the country, and that we've got to reverse that trend. And then another thing another piece of my platform is infrastructure spending. I think that we need to rebuild our brick and mortar infrastructure in order to incentivize companies to want to come here so they can move their products safely, and also cyber infrastructure. Where I live out in the country, I don't have quality high-speed internet access. If I'm running a business out there, I'm at a huge disadvantage. So those two things are going to be key and will be things that I fight for in order to make Oklahoma as prosperous and to achieve the full potential that I know we can get to. I think it's education still. There were steps taken in the previous legislative session to increase teacher pay, which is desperately needed and very well deserved. But it only put a fraction. It put, I think, another $50 million into per pupil spending, which doesn't even put us a fraction of the way back to our 2008 per pupil spending levels. So we have 60,000 more students than 2008, but hundreds of millions of dollars less in the classroom. So that's still a pressing issue. It's still, that's what people are talking about. That's what concerns people. And there was money that was left on the table. There was revenue that was left on the table that wouldn't have asked the middle class to foot the bill for it. So I think that those are the things that people are still talking about, especially in and around District 16. Lately, I've been hearing a little more about the incarceration issues. Oklahoma is number one in the world in incarceration now, both males and females. And that's a big concern for people. It also costs us a lot of money, and it takes people out of our society that could be productive. So that's something that I see as a concern. I actually work as the staff attorney for the Mvskoke Nation's reintegration program. So it's something I see day to day, the issues that these people face upon release from incarceration. And I know that there are things that we can do legislatively to help that transition, to help them become productive members of society, and to lower the cost to taxpayers of incarcerating people.
Most of the time when I'm visiting with constituents around the district, 2 years ago, the two concerns were education and the budget. This time around has been a little bit different in that we're hearing more about rural health care issues and the incarceration rates. I agree with Chandler on. Those are two areas where the legislature has got to come together and work to fix and solve those issues as well. It's one thing to have a single issue, basically platform of education. It's a whole other thing when you actually step into that office. Every day of the week is a completely different day. You could be 1 minute talking about education issues with somebody, and the very next minute you're helping a mother with a DHS problem, and the next minute you're helping a veteran with a health care issue. So we have to work on a multitude of issues. A lot of times I get asked, what is your number one priority? Well, for me, the number one priority is to make sure that Oklahoma gets put back on the right track. One of the areas I agree with Chandler on is Oklahoma has the potential to be one of the greatest states in the union, but we haven't had leadership, and it's gone. I hear this 10-year number all the time. The last 8 to 10 years. That's just not true. Oklahoma's been on a bad track for 20 plus years, 30 years. In fact, during the teacher walkout, I was watching videos from 1965. And in 1965, they were having the exact same issues that we are having today. So to say the cart before the horse, which I hear regularly, is just not the case. You have to work, you have to multitask, you have to do multiple things at the same time. So you can't focus on one over the other. You have to focus on several issues at the same time. Well, I never intended on running for office. That wasn't something that I'd ever planned in my life. So it was kind of just some people asked me to run. And, I've raised my children. I now have grandchildren since I've been elected. And I want to see Oklahoma be prosperous. One of the things that bothers me most about the youth of today, when I talk to them, it seems as though they've lost the ability to dream. They've lost the ability to dream about having a home. They've lost the ability to dream about owning a vehicle and having a family and having a good career path. Those things are important in society. And I just believe that I have the experience and I have the ability to communicate with people well enough and create networks with people to get things done. My whole life has been spent around I have to get it done or nobody else will. So that's why I think that I'm, the most qualified for the job, is because I will create a situation where District 16 has representation for the whole district, not just a few, but for the whole district. I don't care if you're a Democrat, I don't care if you're a Republican, I don't care if you're an independent. I care about Oklahoma, and that's all I care about.
Yeah, so, my family's been in this area for 100 years, literally 100 years. We're here to stay. I was fortunate enough to buy a house here earlier this year with my fiance. So we're invested here. We're here to stay, and I want to fight to make Oklahoma the state that I know it can become. And the reason that I think that I'm the better choice to do that is because I think that I've got some fresh ideas, kind of some new takes on things, and in my profession, in my practice as an attorney, I see these issues play out day to day on the ground every single day with my clients. I have an understanding of how these laws impact people day to day. I have an understanding of how these laws interact with each other. So if there's something that's conflicting with other laws, or if there's a law that doesn't make any sense because the way it plays out is detrimental to people or detrimental to Oklahoma getting on a path to prosperity, I have an understanding and an experience in dealing with those laws that I think makes me uniquely qualified in this race, and the most qualified to do this with my legal background and my experience in running 2 businesses here in town. I think that I have a broad range of experience to bring to the table and some legal knowledge and background to back that up. Yeah, I think that just like Scott said, it's not going to be a single issue where we turn the tide. I mean, it's a whole. In my mind, is rebuilding that foundation towards prosperity. If you have to build a new house, you start with the foundation. And I think that, we start with education. Get our classroom, get our per pupil funding back up. Make sure our teachers are some of the best paid in the nation. Equip them with the resources and the technology so their classrooms are the envy of the nation. We want teachers flocking to Oklahoma, not out of it. And I think that goes a long ways. That's a very long-term investment. I think it's the greatest long-term investment we can make is public education. And second, it goes back to the infrastructure thing. We have to start fresh, and I think that a lot of that is wrapped up in the budget issues that we've had. we've run deficits. We actually are in a surplus this year, which is good news. But we've run deficits for years and years and years because we've continued to cut tax rates on the massive oil and gas companies. And we've continued to cut the top tax rate, and we've continued making short-sighted cuts that were undercutting our future ability to prosper. So I think if we want to start pushing our way back up on those lists, we need to get our priorities straight and realize that, those tax cuts, they're not trickling down to Mulgee, Oklahoma. It's just not working that way. They're not trickling down to District 16. So it's time to make sure everybody is paying their fair share, including the massive oil and gas companies who, for the last 10 years, have really kind of made off pretty good. And I think getting our priorities right and rebuilding that foundation is how we get back to the top of those lists.
Yeah. So to bring us out of those statistics for healthcare, for example, a lot of people want to talk about Medicaid expansion, and we can have those conversations. But there are other things that we can do. One is that we can take, in our rural communities, we don't have doctors anymore. We have a lot of nurse practitioners, PAs, those professions. So one thing we can do is give full practice authority to a nurse practitioner, for example. And the nurse practitioners have petitioned the legislature for several years to do this, so that they could prescribe just a few things. Because right now what's happening is the doctors are charging the nurse practitioners a large sum of money annually to write prescriptions for them. Well, that doctor has never seen me. They don't know my name. All they know is the nurse practitioner calls in a prescription and says, hey, will you sign off on this? And they're paying thousands of dollars a year. That's one thing that we can do to help with our immediate needs right here in our rural communities. Education, we have to go out and recruit and retain the best teachers possible. Why aren't we utilizing our retired educators and trying to bring some of them out of retirement? If you come out of retirement as an educator, you make about half of what a regular teacher makes because of the retirement plans. So why aren't we looking at, paying those people more? They have the experience, they've been in the system, they know the system, and they need to come out and help us through this time. I remember back in the 90s, whenever unemployment was really low, that's when companies began to give better incentives, better insurance, more paid time off, more sick leave, and those types of things. Those are things that we can do immediately. We're not going to fix these problems overnight. But to say that economic development is ridiculous to discuss at this point it doesn't make sense to me. So a couple of things that I've done since I've actually been in the legislature is, one, we ran in my first session, I ran the extension of the aerospace tax credit. We took it from, sunsetting and then going to 4 years, where we actually moved it out 8 years. One of the things that companies need whenever they are looking at your area or your state is they need certainty, they need stability. So we took that out 8 years. Incidentally, since we ran that legislation, we took aerospace from the number 3 economic driver in the state to the 2nd economic driver in the state, surpassing agriculture. So whether we like it or not, people like to use the buzzword corporate welfare, and there are bad tax incentives out there for businesses. The wind incentives were horrible the way they were structured and set up, and it cost us millions of dollars. As far as oil and gas goes, we raised the production tax 150% on the oil and gas companies over the past 2 years. So we have been taking those steps. But as far as moving forward, we have to offer incentives. We have to offer a qualified workforce. And I'm working with Dr. Path and some others in the aerospace industry right now to try to continue to educate. Right now in the aerospace industry, we're struggling to find technicians that come out of, whatever training program to fulfill the job need. So one of the things I'm doing is I'm working with Dr. Path at OSU IT. Everybody agrees that that's the perfect school for us to be able to train aerospace technicians. So, it is education, it's incentives, and it's a whole plethora of different things. By the way, the Department of Commerce is busier now than they've been in decades.
Yeah, I'm not at all opposed to certain incentives to attract businesses, to get them to bring manufacturing facilities to Oklahoma, specifically District 16. I think we have to be very careful with our incentives. There are a lot of incentives that the taxpayer will never get a return on their investment. So we have to be very careful to make sure the incentives are targeted and that there are multipliers from those incentives. So the jobs that come or the money that we're spending on those incentives is going to multiply into other streams of commerce, and there will be a ripple effect. So I'm not opposed to incentives at all. We just have to be careful with them, and that's a good way to address job growth. And additionally, I'm going to jump back to education. OSU IT, just like Scott said, we have one of the premier technical colleges anywhere in the nation. But in the last 2 years, since 2015, they've been cut by $3.5 million. They've had to cut 5 programs completely from the university. And that's hugely detrimental to our direct area, but also to the economic impact that OSU can make. Here in District 16, the Oklahoma Board of Regents estimates we get $4.53 on return on investment for every dollar we spend on education. That's a huge return on investment. And if we put that money back in education so that OSU IT or that green country can be fully utilized and can produce people who have these skills and know these technologies, that's going to help with job growth as well. Yeah, so it's a big question for 2 minutes, but I'll do my best. I think that there's absolutely more that we can do. I don't believe that the state has been good stewards of the money that the tribes have been paying in exclusivity fees and some of these other fees from gaming, because a lot of that was supposed to go to education. That was kind of the line that got a lot of that passed and got the people okay with it. But when that money came in, the state would pull the other money out and kind of supplant the money and move stuff around. So I think that the state needs to be a little more honest with how that money is used. The tribes paid over 1.1 billion in exclusivity fees since 2006. That's billion with a B. So the tribes, the tribal-state relationship is incredibly important. And I say that as a proud citizen of the Mvskoke Nation, and somebody who spent a lot of time studying tribal law in law school and who has an understanding for tribal sovereignty. There's also a case at the Supreme Court right now that's going to really, it may change the nature of the relationship between the state and the Mvskoke Creek Nation. So that's something that we're going to have to watch. And I think that partnership between the tribe and the state is incredibly important for both parties. It's something that's mutually beneficial. It's not a zero-sum game. The compact it may be renegotiated in 2020. So it's a really important time right now. And it's important that we approach it with the win-win mentality. What's good for the tribe is good for the state, and what's good for the state is good for the tribe. And so having that working partnership is incredibly important. And I think that I could act as an effective liaison between the tribe and the state, given my understanding of tribal sovereignty, tribal law, and then my role as a state legislator if I were to be elected.
Yeah, so I'm a citizen of the Choctaw Nation, and I represent the Mvskoke Creek Nation. So I have an interesting perspective in that, the Mvskoke Creek Nation is not politically involved at the level that I would like to see them involved at the state level. Now, the Choctaw Nation, the Chickasaw Nation, the Cherokee Nation, all three are of those tribes I work very closely with. And we just worked on the ball and dice issue, and I was a leader in helping get other legislators to work on that. I think it's extremely important for our state and our local communities to work in partnership with the tribes. I look at Durant as an example. I remember I lived in Durant several years ago. When I lived in Durant, they had a lot of the same demographics that we did at the time. It was very poor, very few jobs. And the Choctaw Nation came together with the community leaders, the county leaders, and they began to work together. And if you've seen the explosive growth that's gone on within the Choctaw Nation, as well as just the community, through economic development, they have great school systems down there. They're a shining example of when people come together and work together on issues. They can overcome the problems in their communities. Now, when it comes to, my role as a legislator, it's very limited on what I can do. I can help with the ball and dice legislation. I can help with, sports book and those issues. The compacts are going to be negotiated by the new governor if they're opened back up. But I've been a strong advocate. I'm supported. My campaign is heavily supported by all three, the Choctaws, the Chickasaw, and the Cherokee Nation, because of the work I've done. Actually, I like Chandler, and I'm hoping that when this is all said and done, Chandler and I can be friends, because he's very accomplished, at this point in his life, and he has a lot of great things to offer, and that's what we need in our community. Our community is plagued with, having people that live here but don't participate in the community. So, I don't have any problem whatsoever. We see some things differently, but I think at the end of the day, we see things more alike than not, and we can, hopefully after we get through this and, over the next few weeks, it's, we've got to separate ourselves and distinguish who we are for this role. But I've known Chandler's family my whole life. My family moved here in '72. My wife's family's been here 100 years too. She's a fourth generation Okmulgee. And so we're both deeply tied to the community. And I think he's an outstanding person from what I know at this point. And I just hope that after the campaign's over, maybe Chandler and I can go, I'll go back down to the local and we can sit down and have a coffee and talk about things that we can work on to better our community together.
And I appreciate that, Scott. Yeah, we were friends before this campaign started, and I fully anticipate we'll be friends afterwards. And something that I appreciate about Scott throughout this race has been our ability to disagree on certain policy points. We can have civil conversation, which is something that's a bit of a lost art in the United States these days. There's a lot of incivility, and that's something that I greatly appreciate about Scott. At the end of the day, we'll always be able to shake each other's hands, look each other in the eyes, and be friends. And I also am impressed with Scott's ability to it's a networking ability. I don't know if that's the right word for it, but to kind of move between groups and to comfortably talk to different groups of people and kind of that social networking, kind of bringing people together type thing is something that has impressed me. I think we've covered a lot of topics, and so what I would kind of end on is where I started. I want people to know that the reason I'm running is because I believe in Oklahoma, and I believe in the future of Oklahoma and the prosperity that I know that we can achieve if we get our priorities right. I think that there's been not enough fighting for the middle class at the Capitol. I think that somebody's got to go up there and fight for middle class and working class Oklahomans, and not nearly as much to the special interests. I think the special interest voices at the Capitol are way louder than the constituent voices, and that's a huge problem. So I want people to know, and I want listeners to know, and voters in District 16 to know that their voices will always be louder to me than any special interest. I will always fight for the middle class, the working class people, because that's what comprises the majority of District 16, and that's how I was brought up. I was raised in that environment, so I know what that's like. And that's kind of what I want people to know is I'm looking to go fight for them, represent them, but fight for them and fight for the prosperity that I know that we can achieve. Just if we rebuild that foundation, properly fund education, fix our infrastructure, get our incarceration rates down. There are a lot of projects that need to be worked on at the state level, and so I would ask that people have put their faith in me and put their belief in me that I have the ability and the knowledge to go up to the Capitol and do those things.
Well, first of all, I want everybody to know that it's been a great honor in my life to go to the Capitol and serve for the past 2 years. If you followed my newspaper articles, if you followed me on Facebook or social media, one of the things that I think we lack in our communities is communication, people understanding how the Capitol works. And so I do a lot of things to try to help our constituents understand what's going on at the Capitol. I think I've been noted as the first person to ever do a Facebook Live video from the chamber floor. And I did it because it was an important issue and I wanted people to be able to watch it. So for me, it's been a great honor, and I've started some work that I would like to finish as far as, middle class Oklahomans. The median income in Okmulgee County is $29,000 a year. The last thing I want to do is hurt our community. I want to rebuild our rural communities. I'm an advocate at the Capitol. Rural versus urban is a real thing, and I am a loud voice at the Capitol. And the good thing about me being at the Capitol as a loud voice, the majority party sets the agenda for the session. I'm in the majority party, which means I have a seat at the table, so I can effectively, loudly, and clearly and concisely talk about that agenda and talk about how it affects our district. For the first time in years, and you could go to the Capitol and ask, for the first time in years since I was elected, Okmulgee County, District 16, our part of Wagner County, Mvskoke County, and Tulsa County, we have a voice, and we are on the forefront of everybody's mind at the Capitol at this point, and it's because I went up there and I had a loud voice for District 16, and I ask you to vote for me on November 6th.